just welcome everyone to our event, My Life, My Business. Wish I was here. A special welcome to Shanaaz, who joins me as usual, who co-hosts this event with me. And Julia will be joining us pretty soon. And what she does is that she captures what we do, what we talk about, and then she might even tweet it in real time. And then the rest of you that join us, some of you come, visit for a few minutes or so, and then leave. But you always have access to the playback, or alternatively, you can watch the edited video on the Mufasa Coaching YouTube channel. So, as you've been aware, I've been talking about business nuggets by a novice biker. And in any event, we went through several chapters, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and last chapter that I did is really deal with the matter of when disaster strikes. And it's an extended metaphor of how you do life and how you actually do business, utilizing these experiences from the novice biker, who happens to be me in this case. So after disaster struck last time and went through that story, that is 2 weeks ago. This week I'm going to talk about chapter 5, getting back on the bike. And the subtitle to this chapter in terms of getting back on the bike is the central theme is dealing with the fear of the known. Normally we talk about the fear of the unknown. Tonight we'll be focusing on the fear of the known. And from when the actual accident happened on this bike, and I found myself in a wheelchair and on crutches over a period of 6 months, it is now fast-tracked to 7 months later, and it's now about the time to start to dust myself off proverbially and to get back on the bike. Because what I suddenly realized, there was a huge battle raging, in my mind. And what I realized was every time I thought about getting back on this bike, I started breaking out into cold sweats. And primarily because I have this fear of having another accident. And the thought is, it's one thing just to say that, but the thought is, last time I was really fortunate just to survive with just a broken knee. This time around, I might come away as a quadriplegic, paraplegic, or lose my life, and then what? So all these things were sort of playing through my mind. The other thing was the doubt that suddenly started creeping in. I was very clear during my recovery period that this was just an accident, but suddenly the doubt started emerging in a form of the question is, what if it's true that the accident meant never to ride again? What does it mean, or what does the experience teach me? What did it actually teach me? Did it teach me that what I've embarked on, it was never meant to be, and therefore the accident happened? So all kinds of thoughts like these. And then, very much the limiting belief of, if you get back on that one, on that bike again, most definitely I'm signing my death warrant. Most definitely all the things that people, my friends and family were now sharing, or have shared with me during the past 7 months, now came back haunting me, meaning that their beliefs that I should not be riding again started clouding my mind. I started asking myself, well, if I really cared about these people who cared about me, surely I should be listening to them. Surely I should stop. Surely I should not get back on this bike. And, as this was raging on in my mind, I suddenly realized that, hey, my mind was captured. There was a stronghold of fear suddenly central somewhere in my mind, And it was an inescapable fact that it was now affecting the rest of my life. It was seeping into all kinds of things: decision making, being adventurous, trying out new thoughts, thinking out of the box, doing out of the box. Suddenly, all these things came crowding back. And, I must say, you have many, many different choices in terms of when this happens. You can, wave the white flag and concede defeat and allow the stronghold to fester and to remain, never to be broached, never to be recaptured again. But I decided that this is my mind. I'm not going to let fear rule it. I'm not going to have this occupation of fear, doubt, and limiting beliefs stay captured within my soul, so to speak. And so, what I had to do was turn my coaching tools on myself. I did it throughout the period of recovery. But now, to get back on the bike, so as to speak, I had to use these tools because I knew that the biggest barrier that I was facing was an internal barrier. And I knew that if I did not conquer that barrier, I would not get back on the bike. I would not enjoy the benefits of choosing to ride a bike in the first place. And so, one thing I do know is if you are intentional with anything, have a plan. Whether it's a plan that you concocted in your mind, or whether it's something that you've sat down and written down, or in these days you've done a video log, in terms of your intentions, with clear activities, next steps. Unless you've done that, you have absolutely a wish that's percolating in your head, but with no real intention of executing anything or taking the right steps towards achieving, in this case, the goal of getting back on the bike. And so my plan included several things. And literally, I'm not making this one up. I decided that, it's fine to have a plan with next steps, with some dates and all these kinds of things, but I felt that accountability would certainly work. Now, in previous episodes, during my recovery period, I spoke about a client who just so partnered, supported me through the process, provided me with resources to be able to be committed still to coach, in any event, ensure that I still fulfill my purpose. So I felt that the way I planned the date that when I'm going to get back on the bike is I discussed it with my client and I said, on that date, I'm getting back on the bike. And he wanted me to attend some meeting. We were interviewing a new employee in the business. And it so happened that this interview was going to take place after hours. I think it was around about 6 at night. And this was March, by the way. So it was still, it was still nice and warm. Weather was pleasant. And I then set and agreed the date and the time that I was going to actually join them during the interview. And then this is where the accountability part actually happened, when I said, I'm going to come to this meeting on my bike as I return from a client. And that was all agreed, and they were all looking forward to this eventuality. So in the preparation phase, now these things are just practical, but I mentioned them. So every plan has got the things that you would think, well, Jacques, why are you mentioning things that are obvious? Let me tell you something. At the heart of every project is the project plan. And how well you actually are able to identify the work that needs to be carried out is what makes the plan executable. And so doing a good work breakdown study, right, is where the plan begins to emerge. Because as you do this, you obviously think about things that sit on a critical part, meaning things that are interdependent, and you identify those dependencies, and then activities that can happen in parallel. So everything goes. There is specifically those little activities that will take a minute or two to carry out. Don't imagine that though it does not matter for you to put that in the plan, because you could literally hold up the plan if that 2-minute activity sits on a critical part. And the bigger portion of the activity depends on it. So do not be afraid to write down what you believe is mundane. If there's any time to do something, it should form part of the activities that you start laying out. And so, yes, different things. I had to find a way to retrieve the bike, because up until this stage, 7 months later, this bike was still parked at my friend's place. So I had to retrieve this bike. Unbeknownst to me, on the day that I did retrieve the bike, where the bike was parked was close to he was doing some home renovations, and the contractors spilled or splattered cement on my bike. I didn't realize there was a lot of elbow grease that need to go in to actually clean this bike. But it was so cathartic. That was part of the intentional part of it. So, by the way, the retrieval of the bike, I cheated. I spoke to my friend, and he rode the bike back to my home. And that was quite interesting. But anyway, and he did that obviously with a lot of love and compassion. But when the bike did arrive at my garage, it looked the way it did. But cleaned it, polished it lovingly. As I said, this bike did not receive a scratch in the accident. It came to an upright standstill against the freeway barrier, which, it's one of those miracle moments that I still think about, I talk about. So there was the bike preparation, and emotionally, as I was cleaning this bike, re-oiling it, making sure everything is tightened and so forth, the reality of what I was going to do started to really connect with my intention and started to reinforce my intention, concretize it. Then, in the accident, when I was retrieved at the accident scene by ambulance, they cut the clothes off me. So I had to get a helmet, a new jacket, new gloves, new pants, all those kinds of paraphernalia, need a new budget and so forth, which I had to go and do the shopping to get these things. So that was all part of the plan, where I was going to do it, what types of things I was going to buy. And then the last thing I did as part of the plan was try and limit the kinds of things that would feed my fear. And as spoken about earlier, weather is an important thing. I did not want to ride in the wet weather. I did not want to ride when there was a hailstorm, Shanaaz, and all these kinds of things. So I looked for the best time possible where the forecast was excellent. And so I settled on my date. It was a Tuesday in March. Settled on my date. Weather was absolutely perfect. Now came the opportunity to execute the plan. And I must say, I got on the bike that Tuesday morning. I was going to travel to a client that was about 90 kilometers away. I chose that one specifically because I needed that entire duration, and I suspected that I needed to work through a lot of kinks. Things that I was aware of that was going to be set off in me, and others that I believed I would encounter during the journey. I did not anticipate the impact the traffic had when I hit it. When I bought this bike and I hit the traffic, I encountered all kinds of things, and that is dealt with in chapter 1. But I'm now much more a seasoned rider, so I know what traffic is like in the early morning especially. But what I did not anticipate was the full-blown anxiety that I experienced. You see, many times after something goes badly wrong, in my case, and remember, I'm using this as an analogy, having an accident on my bike, but many times in different ways, failing in certain ways, whether it's business, whether it's on a project, whether it's relationship failure, But and some of it is your experience has been fairly traumatic. So all these things play such a role in terms of facing your fear. So I had to face my full blown anxiety. I was riding with such a lump in my throat, and that so as a consequence of my accident, every single peripheral movement I felt was a threat. I was suddenly overly cautious. I was not doing any lane splitting. I was riding behind the cars. I was, my speed that I was keeping was well within the speed limit. Became very tentative, unsure. So obviously my confidence has taken a huge dent in this, in getting back on the bike and realizing that every single decision that I was making, whether I was going to change lanes, whether I was going to change lanes to the left or to the right, whether I was going to overtake a motor vehicle, everything seemed risky. And I found that the fear was just feeding my imagination. I was just imagining that every car was now going to trample me. Every car I was going to either hit or they were going to hit me. It was just crazy how I was doing this on the bike, in the traffic, in real time, but my imagination was just running riot. Finding that I was so tentative because of every movement, second guessing myself. That's actually what happened. Second guessing the environment that I was in. Second guessing, could not read cars for suddenly, and this was a skill that I've built up. Did not know what the car was going to be. The uncertainty was just rife. And but I completed the distance of the 90 kilometers, arrived at my destination, and it was like I spent time in a sauna. I mean, if ever I wanted to use that opportunity to sweat out all kinds of toxins and maybe lose some weight, that was it. And however, dried myself off, and then I had a wonderful day of coaching at my client's premises. And for me, is realizing that after that first ride to the client's premises, I rode back from my client straight into the meeting that I had after hours with another client, of course, the one that really supported me tremendously throughout my recovery period. And when I got there, he actually walked out to where I parked the motorbike. And number one, remember I said he was going to be my accountability partner. And he witnessed the fact that I actually rode, witnessed how I got on this bike, how I got off this bike. And the one thing I did not mention is I was riding this bike, fully conscious that my leg was still healing, that I was still wearing a brace, fully conscious that the brake was still there, fully conscious that I had to use a different foot rather than the left foot rather than the right foot. So I had to rebalance all those kinds of things consciously. That is the different things that I started to tweak and learn that I had to I actually had to reprogram myself. So I built up this mental checklist of all the things that I now needed to work on. And so I really want to just lastly talk a little bit about failure. You can get back on the bike after you have fallen off. The proverbial is really the one thing that I do know. It is consistency through repetition. So every day, get back on that bike. Every day, without fail. And what happens is that when you're consistent and you don't even allow your mind to talk yourself out of doing what you know you're fearing, fear begins to fade little by little. It's not over in a day. That one ride didn't do it for me. I had to repeat the exercise every day. Repeat the exercise in different circumstances. Start getting used to different weather patterns again, because March turned into April, turned into winter, then spring with rain, and in all kinds of seasons, had to go through that period again. And then started to relax a lot more, began to trust myself a lot more, began to trust the knee that was in a brace a lot more, because this knee was rebuilt, and it was actually quite strong. It was actually stronger than what it was as without it being um, rebuilt with metal. It was now, and I mean this tongue in cheek, it was more bionic, because this is what my biokineticist was telling me. Trust the knee, it's much stronger than the other one. And I started to trust it a lot more. And but yeah, I began to rebuild that sort of sense of familiarity and ease in my environment again. I started to reconnect with the way I was reading my environment, starting to rebuild my sense of anticipation, and started to get back to the kinds of things that I was doing with such gay abandonment previously. Now I had to consciously get myself back to that place. And to get back to full throttle meant I started to enjoy myself again. Loved the journey, loved the fact that I could get into in the traffic and be punctual again, and sense that sense of freedom, sense the ability to just have clarity of mind, find clarity of purpose again. I mean, you might be wondering, but why? That's just a bike ride. No, it was much more than that. It was rediscovering, reconnecting with my self confidence. Confidence is key, because one of the things that I battled to do during my first ride was own my lane. In the beginning, I learned that owning your lane was important, but after the accident, I struggled to own my lane again. And when my confidence returned, my ability to own my lane returned. The ability to ride confidently without fear and be seen and be respected. And so, you know, for you listening, I don't know what exactly happened in your life. Here's the one guarantee: if you're living a life, something went wrong somewhere along the way. And maybe you got stuck, you moved away from that experience, you promised yourself never again. I just want to say to you that at least just that one time, you need to get back in the saddle and do that, just to prove that you will not allow that one thing to be such a limiting fear in your life, that it won't be a stronghold in your life that's ruling by fear, unbelief, and doubt. And so get back in the saddle. If there's a goal that you wanted to achieve, get back to trying to achieve that goal. Whatever it might be, whatever that vision is, live your purpose. By the way, that experience have given you well-rounded wisdom. The thing that you feared, and sometimes the thing that you feared the most, which is like when you run that what if scenario in there, what if something went wrong? So guess what? Something did go wrong. You've added to your toolbox of wisdom. And so your ability to conquer the obstacles in your mind has now grown. And we always say you win twice. You win in your mind and you win physically. And I want to just encourage you that after listening to this story, very simply, is get on your bike and ride again. Thank you. That's me for this afternoon.
I was gonna say, would you like me to comment on it? Because you went
As
quiet, and I was
usual.
like, are you waiting on me, or are you
Yes.
thinking?
No, that's me. I've done, and I just want to know if you got some thoughts.
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, the metaphors are great about getting back on the bike. And when and the fears. I mean, there were so many things that I kind of got out of there. And the fact that you still went ahead, and despite the fear, you completed it. What it actually one what I commented in the chat was that feeling of fear when you kind of got on the bike again was actually your a part of the brain. It's called the amygdala, and it has
Mm-hmm.
like an alarm system. So I think that what was kind of going off for you was your alarm system, and so it kind of made me think about maybe I could chat about that next week. But in terms of because a lot of people they stop there because that fear becomes so overwhelming, and
Mm-hmm.
if they engage with it, it actually and they have some tools that help them and ground them. And for you, in a sense, you did that trauma work on your own, and I think because you're a coach, so you had some skills that and information you could rely on in terms of planning, and holding someone accountable, that you had someone to be accountable for, and that was, and I think that that's so amazing, and it shows that, like I always say, you don't have to go into therapy always to kind of, most of us don't need that. But if we have some information that can help us through particular experiences, like the fears that we sometimes avoid or phobias, for example, then we can actually overcome those fears. And I think you literally kind of did some of the techniques that we would use and the information. So the planning, for example, and the talking to someone and having someone accountable. um, when we do trauma work, we talk about moving the traumatic event from the one side of the brain to the other. And in that process, you actually did that. And we talk about where the fears or the traumatic experiences um, become verbally accessible, and we are no longer triggered. So it's something that can become readily accessible, and I think that that's some of the trauma work. So when people do engage with it and make those plans, and have someone to be accountable to in a supportive environment, the fears do not have to limit them, and they can actually overcome, these experiences that they had. I'm actually going to be working with a young woman who was involved in a car accident, and she's been having panic attacks when she gets into the car, but she needs the car obviously for work. So it's going to be looking at some of those things. And I think a lot of people have these limiting fears, but they don't always feel free to share or talk about it. And I know this young lady very well, and I had no idea that she was having these panic attacks. And so I think that people are kind of, they feel embarrassed, to talk about it. It's almost like there's something wrong with them, or they feel that, they're going a little nutty, and they don't want anyone to know because of the stigma of being vulnerable and having particular fears and phobias. But that was, really, the kind of work that you did with yourself is actually, some of the ways in which we help people to overcome these fears and limiting beliefs, as you said. So yeah, that was great.
Well, that's a perfect summary as usual. So yes, I mean, so much that I can, the technical things that I had to deal with. It's amazing, and you trust that that chair will support whatever that is. Yeah, but have a fantastic week, and yeah, meet you next week.
Thank you. Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.